Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Hello, sir.
Hey, man.
Hey, dude. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you so much.
Are we saying how old you are? Or are we keeping that a secret?
1,582 years old.
Amazing. And in all your years, this is the worst trade policy you've ever seen.
Yes. I mean, by the United States. I've seen some other countries do some dumb crap, but I've never seen us do this crap this dumb.
And since we last spoke a few days ago, are you feeling any better or worse or the same?
Pretty much the same. I think one thing that we've learned is that the Trump administration is not significantly more competent than it was in its first incarnation. I think there was this idea floating around, and I bought into this idea, honestly, that the kind of tech right had infused the administration with this sort of competence. You know, we know a couple people who are either in the administration or soon will be. And it was like, oh, these are competent people. Maybe, the right wing is now a competent thing in America again. We're back to maybe heading in the direction of the days of Reagan, when like educated people joined the GOP and like a bunch of business people just like sort of flooded into government work and did pro-business stuff. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's back, but no, it's just a giant clown car, because that's what happens when you have a personality cult, especially with a really old guy like Trump. Usually when you have these personality cults, they get established when the guy is pretty young. And then by the time he gets old, everyone kind of knows that he's like headed downhill and that he's kind of getting a little kooky and he's doing dumb stuff. But so there's this period at the end where it's just obvious everything's falling apart. We started with that. Like, there was his first term, but he was kind of stymied during his first term. And now he's the old guy. He's like the dictator in winter, like falling apart and just saying like, oh, 125% tariffs, 140% tariffs, 90% tariffs. Like, oh, we're exempting this sector. Oh, we're putting new tariffs on this sector. Oh, we're going to start it again in 90 days. It's like absolute clown car. Like, and of course, later everyone will say, oh, this was the art of the deal. All this tariff uncertainty was for a purpose. What we really wanted to do is blah, blah, blah. And like, they'll make it up on the fly. At this point, they all realize they're making it up on the fly. We all realize they're making it up on the fly. It's just obvious to all, like they're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know that they're lying. And so like that's like an old Soviet line, actually. And so like, we all know that these guys are just making up stuff on the fly. And the point is that like at some point, like the question of why they're doing it becomes more complex than the question of what do we do about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, some people will quote what is it? They say the Madman theory. Like if they act reasonably, then they can be predicted or sort of negotiated with, and there's some sort of negotiation tactic. Chamath and Sachs were saying this to Larry Summers and Ezra Klein. I don't know if you caught that interview, but there was something from that interview I actually wanted to get your feedback on, because it looked like Sachs was basically sort of saying, hey, we made this mistake by letting China into the WTO, and it sort of empowered China, emboldened them, enriched them. And then Larry Summers was sort of asking Sachs for specifics around like what restrictions were removed, or because he's basically saying, hey, Sachs, you have this idea that we were asleep at the wheel, or that we sort of enabled China to get richer, and we should have done much more to stop them. And Larry, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, and what mistakes we did make. And Sachs, didn't quite, in my opinion, have the exact responses there. I'm curious to get your read on that question.
So I actually haven't seen the interview. I haven't seen that interview, so I can't speak exactly to that. I mean, so I can say Madman theory is for nuclear war, right? Madman theory is where you scare the other guy into thinking that you're willing to launch a world-destroying nuclear war if they make a funny move, so they can't push you around. So they so you better not try anything, guys, because I'm gonna launch the nukes. Like, that's Madman theory. But why would you do that to your own businesses? Like, why would you do that to American manufacturers? Why would you act like a madman to them? Like, what is the nuclear war you don't want them to do? Like, instead, you're scaring them away from investment. Like, you you wanted to scare the Soviets during the Cold War because they were bad people who might do bad things to us. But then our own manufacturers and our own businesses, like, there's no reason to be a madman and scare them. What's the rationale of why we want to scare our own businesses? What do we want to scare them about?
No, that we don't want to scare them. We want to give them stable expectation. Yeah.
I feel like we don't want to scare them. Like, if you want America to be rich, if you want like investment and wage go up and GDP go up and stock market go up and all these things go up, you don't want to scare your businesses. But that's what we're doing. If you look at economic policy uncertainty, it's never been higher than it is now. Like, it's off the charts. And so, like, madman theory is correct. Like yes, it is causing massive uncertainty. Yes, it is scaring people, and manufacturers are laying people off now. Like, that's real. That's an actual thing that's happening. And then, Goldman Sachs now predicts zero growth for the next year. We were at like 3% growth before. That's like, we have to wait and see if that pans out, right? We have to wait and see if that growth actually, zero growth materializes. It could surprise on the upside. We all hope, right? But like, yeah, so I don't understand madman theory as applied to, your own businesses, because if what you want your businesses to do is invest in America, you don't want to convince them that you're a madman. You want to de-risk investment. The way you get businesses to invest is by convincing them that the investment is a low risk investment that will definitely pay off. And Madman does the opposite of that. So I don't get it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'll return to the China question later when we'll talk about sort of what containment strategies actually do work. But first, just on the economic growth point, why would Goldman Sachs be anticipating 0% economic growth? Like, what about what just happened is going to negatively affect economic growth?
Yep. So one important thing to understand about the business cycle is that investment moves around a lot more than consumption. Actually, most of what happens in a business cycle is not that people buy more or don't buy more. And I think that we all grew up with this idea that the American consumer needs to go out and consume and blah, blah, blah. That's only important really to the degree that it gets businesses to invest more. So like a little more consumption could spur businesses to invest a lot more, in which case you get, so investment is the most volatile component of the business cycle. Basically, when businesses build a lot of stuff, economy go up. And so that's how it really works. And housing is usually the biggest component of investment, though not always. And so that's how the business cycle basically works. And so if companies are scared to build a new factory, to build, new buildings, to build, to like roll vehicles off the lines, to, that all that stuff, and they're also not going to hire workers. If they're scared to do that, all that investment, so investment is what hires workers. So like, if you build a new building, you need to hire construction workers. If you expand your business, if you expand into new lines of business, get new clients and, make new sales and all this stuff, you need to hire human beings to do all that stuff. If you sell more software, you need to hire more engineers, right? Or like service people to, take care of it. Anyway, the point is that investment drives employment. Ultimately, like, investment is the thing. And so right now you've got several factors weighing on investment from Trump, all from Trump's tariff policies and from the uncertainty surrounding them. So you've got this uncertainty, as I said. Madman theory is causing businesses not to invest. They all cite, they all cite uncertainty as a reason not to invest. That's one. Number two is the actual tariffs. So if you can't get intermediate inputs, like, suppose I have a business that makes like fancy gadgets and I just need some molybdenum, right? And then suddenly I can't get my molybdenum. Well, okay, I could now become a molybdenum mining business, but that, first of all, that vertical integration makes me less efficient, because there's a reason I outsourced in the first place, because you don't want like Apple to be like a molybdenum mining company and do every single other thing itself. Apple specializes in making phones. And so like, so then you have to despecialize, and that sucks. And then it takes years and years. Like, you don't know how to mine molybdenum. Like, you know, so that's a big problem, is lack of intermediate inputs. Okay. And maybe some company will emerge that will learn how to mine molybdenum, and will mine all our own molybdenum. I just really like saying the word molybdenum, as you can tell. It's a beautiful name. So then But the point is that this would, even if it happens, would take a really long time. Of course, uncertainty is just going to hold that back too. But the point is that America is deindustrializing now because tariffs are preventing manufacturers from getting what they need to make their stuff. And so, of course, they're hurting service business too, but they're hurting manufacturers more because manufacturers are more supply chain, right? They have a larger string of inputs. Like a service business, like, if you write software, it's just like cloud computing, engineers, butt in chair, write some code. It's pretty simple. But then if you make like aircraft, you need like a million little pieces of stuff and like a million little materials. And so it's just, you've seen the Milton Friedman pencil video.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So like if a pencil is that complex, like anything that you make is going to be more complex than that. So like, yeah, so manufacturers are going to get hurt more by actual tariffs. So that's the second thing that's hurting investment in America. The third thing hurting investment in America is borrowing costs. So now treasury yields are going up. A yield is an interest rate. So should I take a little time to explain what a yield actually is and why that's like an interest rate?
Yeah, please.
All right. So when you have a bond, you have two ways that you make money off the bond. The first is called a coupon, which basically it's like they send you like a check each month or year or whatever it is. Like they send you like, if you have a 5% coupon rate, then 5% of the official face value of the bond, they send you that amount of money in a check or, deposit to your account or whatever every month or year or something like that, 6 months. Okay. That's the coupon rate. The second way you earn money on a bond is if the bond's price is low, and yet you know what the bond's price will be at maturity. So like if you have a bond whose face value is $1 million, okay, that bond is going to pay you $1 million on some set date. Well, the value of that bond on that date will be $1 million because a thing a little magic Zelda treasure box that like vanishes and turns into $1 million is worth $1 million. Okay. So you know that it's eventually going to be $1 million. So today, if it's worth like $700,000, you know that the price will appreciate, assuming it doesn't default, the price will appreciate until it hits $1 million. So that expected appreciation is also part of the yield. So the yield is actually just the coupon rate plus the expected appreciation. And so those are the two ways you make money on a bond. The yield is like the total interest rate you get on a bond. It's like the rate of return on a bond. So when I say yields and when I say interest rates, I mean the same thing. Okay. I'm never talking about that little coupon rate. I'm always talking about the total rate of return you get on a bond. So yeah, so basically treasury yields are going up, which basically means that America as a country, our borrowing cost has increased, but also corporations' borrowing costs increased because everything is sort of benchmarked to the treasury, and whether or not that's rational we can discuss, but it is. And so basically you're never going to get like, basically treasuries are like always going to be safer than corporate bonds because if the US defaults, all the corporations will default too. That's the short explanation for that. But anyway, so then as treasury yields go up, corporate borrowing costs go up as well. Just when we talk about interest rates going up, yields go up, borrowing costs go up. Those are all the same thing. That's going up. Why is it going up? Well, it's when you see it happen along with the dollar going down, what's going on is that people are selling US treasuries. And when you sell bonds, their price goes down, which means the expected price appreciation goes up, which means the yield goes up because the bonds are
And who's selling exactly?
foreigners. So we don't know exactly which foreigners because they don't have names on their accounts. It's like crypto, right? If you know the wallet address, but you don't know who owns that wallet, right? It's like the same thing. Someone somewhere knows, but basically foreigners, probably a lot of Europeans and Asians, like so allies and enemies alike are selling our bonds and they're moving their money overseas. Some of our people may be selling their bonds and like piling out of America. Some of them may be saying, okay, America's fucked, I'm out, I got to get money out of this country. Like we're obviously going down the tubes. Like it's not unreasonable. So that's called capital flight, right? It's like we got to get out of this country. America hasn't seen capital flight since like the 70s. We saw a bit with the Nixon shock and just Nixon did some dumb stuff. But we haven't seen capital flight for a very long time. And so now we're seeing capital flight. And that's new. It means that people think that US bonds are now risky. And so that's new. We used to think that was the most safe thing you could possibly have. That was the safest asset, right? And so now capital flight raises borrowing costs because when people don't want to invest in your bond, you've got to raise your interest that you pay them in order to get them to invest, right? You've got to entice them. You've got to say, hey guys, we're offering an even higher interest rate. Come buy this bond, So yields are going up. And when you sell bonds, you create a discount on the price, and then the expected price appreciation increases the yield. So basically, when people sell bonds, yields go up. So bond prices and interest rates or yields go in opposite directions. That's an important thing. At the beginning of, have you ever read the book Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis?
Oh yeah, amazing book.
Yeah. And so he goes there, and he's like, don't you want to teach me anything, to the traders on the floor? And the guy says, when interest rates go up, what way do bond prices go? He's like, down. He's like, yeah, now get me a fucking sandwich. And then so always remember that. Anyway, so that increases borrowing costs for companies. If you can't borrow, how are you going to invest? How are you going to build a factory? How are you going to hire people? How are you going to take people on if you can't borrow money? Companies live and die by money borrowing. So there's 3 big reasons why investment in the United States will go down and GDP will slow down. Does all of that make sense? Like, am I making sense, or am I just like spewing?
No. This is good Econ 102 stuff.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays. The same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com.
I remember hearing somewhere that Trump wanted a weaker dollar, or that there were some positives to having a weaker dollar. Can you give a bit of background as to the pros and cons of sort of, having a weak currency, or how we should think about it?
Right. So the dollar so basically, the reason you can have a strong currency, there's 2 reasons. There's 2 reasons people would want your currency. Okay. The first reason is to buy your goods and services, your actual stuff. And the second reason is to buy your IOUs, your bonds. Okay. Now, America has had a very strong currency because everyone wanted to buy our bonds.
And do we want that?
Well, that's a great question. So it makes us richer in terms of, it allows us to afford more consumption. It lets us live richer, nicer lifestyles and have more DoorDash and more bigger houses and all that stuff. But at the same time, it weakens our manufacturing because it makes our exports less competitive in the global market.
Some people say that it basically helps rich people and hurts poor people, or helps people in certain, sort of white collar sectors and hurts people in blue collar. Like, how divorced?
Not necessarily. So the people it helps are borrowers. Okay. And usually people say, oh, well, it helps rich people because corporations borrow to fund their operations and rich people own the corporations. So when companies are able to borrow easily, then it makes stockholders rich and, bondholders rich, and it makes owners of companies rich. Okay. That's the typical, argument. And then, but on the other hand, who borrows money? Like like mortgage people who pay mortgages, and those are overwhelmingly middle class. So one reason you can get a cheap mortgage is because of this so-called exorbitant privilege, strong dollar, lots of funding from overseas for bonds, right? And so you can get a cheap mortgage, you can buy a big house. Now mortgage rates are going up. That's going to hurt regular folks. And so that's a problem. And who else borrows? Well, poor people pay stuff on their credit cards. They don't have a lot of income, so they've got to use like credit cards and stuff. Is that good? No, I think like it's not great for poor people to buy stuff on their credit cards. At the same time, it does probably allow them to live a little bit beyond their means, and so now that'll be harder for working class folks to live beyond their means with a credit card. So whether that's good or bad, I can't tell you, but mortgage borrowers are going to be hurt, and I think that's probably bad. Corporations are going to be hurt. So corporations, yeah, they're owned by rich people, but they also like hire people, not necessarily you because you're entrepreneurial or me, but regular folks are hired by corporations. So when they can't borrow, like, yeah, it's going to hurt the rich people, but it's going to hurt the regular people too. And so it's going to hurt everybody. However, if you think that we're going to be conquered by China's going to whoop our ass, we need to manufacture more, therefore we need a weaker dollar so that we can use export markets to get scale so that we can have bigger, better manufacturers, well, then a weaker dollar is in our interest there. The problem is, if you create a weaker dollar by cutting us off from foreign trade and by tanking our exports, which is currently happening, our imports are tanking, but our exports are tanking too. If you do that, you kind of defeat the purpose of a weaker dollar. Like, you'd want a weaker dollar, all other things equal, in order to be able to defend ourselves. Because if you have a competitive currency, you can export more. That increases the scale of customers that your manufacturers are able to sell to, which allows your manufacturers to scale up and become more efficient. So a weaker dollar in that sense is good. But if you get a weaker dollar by, smashing your own trade, you defeat the whole hypothetical purpose of a weaker dollar. And so that's the problem with this. So we're getting it the wrong way. It's like that's like, like medical care might make you healthier, but if you shoot yourself in the leg to get some medical care, you're overall not healthier. And that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like Sachs and Chamath are coming up. These are regime apparatchiks, right? These are guys whose interests lie in just saying everything Trump does is great and crazy like a fox and art of the deal or just whatever, right? Their interest lies there, so they're always going to say that. So they just sort of scramble to come up with these ad hoc justifications. But as Trump scrambles to change his policies or, clarify what his policies are, like as he changes policies, the justifications have to change. So you see guys like Sachs and Chamath scrambling as well to change their justifications. And it's like, I don't know anyone who sort of like honestly believes in this. In fact, we're seeing that Trump represents an accelerant to decline. Trump is sort of, we were sort of slowly rolling down a hill and Trump just like kicked us off a cliff. It's like, that's what's actually going on. And the problem is that this trade policy is going to deindustrialize us. Like, you can say till you're blue in the face that trade policy, that tariffs reindustrialize us. And I can write you down a model where tariffs do reindustrialize us. The problem is that model has some very special conditions that aren't satisfied in the real world. Okay. And so, one of those things is that there's no retaliation. So retaliation will deindustrialize you. Another of those special cases is there's like, basically it's a bilateral trade thing where we're trading with like one country. The point is that China depends less on our market than we depend on the entire world. So if we tariff the entire world, we're tariffing 100% of our imports. And if China just, 20, like, oh no, only 13% of their exports go to us. And if you add in value added stuff, it's still under 20%. They can just find other markets or just sell themselves. They'll be hurt a little bit, but they're ultimately fine. Like, they don't need us as much as we need the whole world. Like, if it was just us versus China and we're only tariffing China, that would be another story, right? But we're tariffing the whole world. And so we need the world more than China needs one export market. Okay, so that's why just the simple two-country model doesn't actually work here, because in the two-country model, their exports are your imports and vice versa. You're only trading with this one country. Here, the rest of the world can just be like, okay, fuck you, you're North Korea, we're just going to trade with each other. and will be hurt a little bit because this one country cut itself out of the global trading system. But like if North Korea or Russia or whatever gets cut out of the global trading system, does it really hurt the rest of the world? Well, it hurts them a little. And like America's bigger, we're a lot bigger than those guys, and so it's going to hurt the world more. So the world will be hurt, but ultimately they'll go play with each other. China will trade with Japan and India and Brazil, and they'll trade with China. Like they'll all trade with each other, and we will just cut ourselves off and be this little island of North Korea. Like it's dumb shit. It's
Let's go back to the exports part because I'm confused.
Does it ever bother you when you see people whose companies you invest in like sort of scramble to say all this stuff? Like, do you worry? I guess I shouldn't ask that because it like does have relevance for your business. I don't want you to make any public statements about these stuff, but like, does it like anyway? If you can tell me.
Well, it only worries to the extent that it affects their business, and I don't think I don't think it affects Chris's business, but yeah, I think there was an era of, I think 2025, you can kind of say what you want these days. I think there was an era where it was much riskier to your business. And, not do you say everything you want, but the sort of, cancel culture has died down a bit from people's customers and sort of employees and stuff. But yeah, definitely did during 2020.
Yeah. I mean, but like also, if you think about it, like Trump just called for revoking CNN's broadcast license, FCC broadcast license, for because they did some stories about him that he didn't like, that criticized him. So there's cancel culture, and then there's just like the government just says thou mayest not criticize the government. Like I don't know, I fear that more than just standard cancel culture. Like cancel culture is irritating, like it could suck, but like if the government's actually going to punish you or sue you or sort of just crack down on you, revoke your licenses and all this stuff, like that's actually scarier than cancel culture. Like that is every like dystopian movie. It's like the government, and we've seen it. It's the dystopian movies. Nobody's that creative, right? The dystopian movies are based on reality.
Yeah.
Right, because we saw the Soviet Union do this. We saw like a million countries do this.
I haven't looked into that specific situation, but I do agree that, yeah, governments sort of, unpersoning people or organizations for criticizing. We should be free to criticize our presidents. So I agree on the broader idea. I want to return back to the export point. I understand why America would want to reduce imports to try to favor its own, subsidize its own businesses, but wouldn't exports also help helping exports help its own businesses? What's the argument for reducing exports? Why do they do it?
What's the argument for reducing exports?
Yeah.
None. There's no good argument for reducing exports. It's like someone comes and wants to pay you for stuff, and then you're like, no. It's like that's like if you have a business. If America were business, exports are our sales. All right. Why would you reduce sales in a business?
I see no reason. So
I don't see a good reason.
Yeah. So got it. So you're basically like, is their desire to reduce exports explicit? Like,
no,
as retarded as it seems, or you're just, this is an implicit, like, do they know that they're doing it?
I don't think they really focus on a lot or care very much. They think, I don't know how they think. Okay. And I sometimes I wonder if they think at all, but to the extent that they do think, I think that they harken back to a time when America's exports are relatively small because most countries didn't trade very much. We didn't have like container ships and the internet, like world trade was just a lot less. They think America can buy what America makes. There's probably some people in the administration who, if they thought about it, would actually say imports are a loss because we're losing money and exports are a loss because we're losing stuff. We're sending stuff overseas instead of consuming it ourselves. Well, those can't both be true. Like if paying money for stuff is bad and selling stuff, for money, if like paying money for stuff is bad and selling stuff for money is bad, if those are both bad, like how? It just, it doesn't make sense. But I don't think they've even thought that far. Like I think that they just they assume that America doesn't export everything. They've bought this sort of social media hype that America doesn't make anything anymore. They don't know that, Honda auto plants in like Tennessee or Kentucky or wherever are actually making cars for Europe. They don't know that. They don't know that, like, maybe they know that Boeing sells jets overseas, but like they believe that we don't make anything anymore. And that's just fake. That's false. I mean, we don't make enough stuff. Our manufacturing has shrunken too much. We don't export enough. We need to export more. But that doesn't mean we export zero. That we export a shit ton. Like how much is it's hundreds of billions of dollars. Hold on. Let me look this up. US exports 2024. US exports 2024, $2.1 trillion. We sold $2.1 trillion of stuff to other countries. Trillion. That's a lot, man. And it has a multiplier too, because money you get from outside circulates around your local economy and people spend on pizza and doctor's appointments and massages, whatever people spend money on. So there's an export multiplier as well. And so actually the total value of exports to our country is more than 2.1 trillion. Now our GDP is what, 30 trillion? Hold on. US GDP 2024. Let's see. Our GDP, yeah, $30 trillion. So like, suppose the export multiplier is like, 1.5. So every dollar that we sell, we get 1.5 more dollars of domestic economic activity, right? So that's times 2.5, $6 trillion. That's 20% of our GDP. If we cut ourselves from exports, we'll get 20% poorer. Oops. I don't think our exports are going to zero, but I do think that 20% poorer sounds like a bad day.
Right. What is the mechanism by which exports we're reducing our exports?
Great question. The first mechanism is that, so first I'll say traditionally with tariffs, the mechanism by which they reduce exports is by appreciating your exchange rate. If our exchange rate crashes because there's capital flight, then that obviously cancels that out. So the first mechanism but for reduced exports, it would be that. But okay, so in reality, retaliation. Countries are not going to buy our stuff. China just canceled Boeing orders. Okay, that's mechanism number one, is just pure retaliation. That's easy to understand, right? We don't buy their shit, they don't buy our shit. They're like, fuck you, America. We ain't buying your planes today. And so like, there's your cold open, I guess. We're not going to buy your planes. And so then we can't sell planes. And so that's number one. Number two is this intermediate goods problem, which absolutely no one in the administration except Joe Lonsdale seems to understand. Joe Lonsdale's like, guys, my manufacturing companies are doing bad now because we can't get imported components. Oops. And so like, then they'll try to give Lonsdale a carve out, or they'll just ignore Lonsdale, right? He's not, he's rich, but he's not rich enough to be like the biggest fish. They're ignoring Elon. If they ignore Elon, they'll ignore Lonsdale. Like, they're ignoring Elon. Elon was there calling Peter Navarro Peter Retardo. Like, if you think that Trump is crazy like a fox, then you've got to think Elon is dumb. Who do you think is more likely to be dumb, Elon Musk or Peter Navarro? And when it comes to manufacturing things,
Peter Retardo.
Yes. I mean, like, that's not a hard question. Elon Musk is the only man who has scaled new high-tech manufacturing businesses in America in my lifetime. There is one guy, and he's done it twice. Maybe more, I don't know. We won't talk about the Boring Company. But Tesla and SpaceX, those are world-beating, high-tech manufacturing companies with all-American manufacturing scaled really rapidly, even in our system that makes it really hard to manufacture. Elon Musk did that. He knows about manufacturing things. And Peter Navarro is sort of like, he's about it as good an economist as like I am in terms of research, which is to say he didn't really do research. But then like, in terms of actually thinking and understanding the economy, he's much worse. He just sort of like spews out a bunch of, crazy crap and doesn't even understand how imports affect GDP. Like he couldn't teach an undergrad economics course. In that sense, I'm better. But then, so Elon Musk versus Peter Navarro, like, come on. Okay, so we've got retaliation hurting exports. We've got imported component problem hurting exports, and then those are really the important points. So then we've got borrowing costs. Capital flight, borrowing costs. If like exporters need to borrow, Boeing needs to borrow money to make those planes if they want to sell the planes overseas, right? If they can't borrow money because interest rates go up, well, then you can't make the planes and you can't deliver the planes, and Airbus is just going to outcompete you. And even China's new companies are going to outcompete you. You're just going to get outcompeted because they can borrow money and you can't. The bond market. So like, that's how it works. Like, the bond market rules everything, and you can't just order the bond market around. We can talk about that too. Like, Trump can try to order the bond market around by ordering the Fed to do stuff, but that will just make things worse. So come on. Like, so you can't borrow money, you can't get imported components, and then everybody's retaliating against you. That's going to crush U.S. export.
Right. And the Fed's not going to listen. How would he try to boss the bond market around? Or how could one try?
So if you're the government, you're borrowing money when you issue bonds. Okay. You can't tell average people what price to pay for those. You can't. I mean, you can. It's called financial oppression. You can basically say, banks, you will lose your charter if you don't buy the government bonds. That's called financial oppression. We can do that. We talk about that later. I'll write a post on that. But it's not going to really help the situation much. But what you really do as a government is you go to your central bank. You say, central bank, print money and buy the bonds. If you buy the bonds, the interest rate on the bonds goes down. Think about it this way. Buy bonds. If you buy something, the price of it goes up, right? Demand go up, price go up. If you go out and buy Nintendo Switch 2s, they can raise the price on you. Okay, demand go up, price go up. So Fed goes, prints money, uses it to buy bonds. The price of bonds goes up. And when the price of bonds goes up, what way do interest rates go?
Down.
Down. Yes. 100% on pop quiz. So then, so when you buy bonds, you're actually driving interest rates down. And so the Fed drives, and that's called quantitative easing. We've done it before. It's just QE, right? So the Fed can do QE. You can go buy all the long-term treasury bonds with printed money. What happens when you buy stuff with printed money? Well, if you have no capital flight, and if you have a captive banking system and can do financial oppression, and if you've got like long-term structural aging and productivity problems and all these other things that hold down inflation, well, then maybe you won't get inflation. Maybe then you're Japan. Okay. So Japan did this and they didn't get inflation. But most countries, when they do this, they get inflation. Because when you print money, prices go up. Like, you're devaluing in dollar internally and externally too, right? Your interest rate will go down more. Your exchange rate will go down more. Dollar will go down more. But then, like, if you print all that money, you will get inflation because you're pumping a ton of money into the economy. And a whole lot of other things have to happen in order to stop that inflation from happening, in order to cancel out that inflation. Like, you need a whole bunch of other things to be in place to cancel out that inflation. In general, print money, get inflation. Just Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And to be honest, I think he has never been proved wrong. I think a lot of people wanted to prove him wrong, but it turns out, because if inflation isn't a monetary phenomenon, then that lets the central bank do magic money tree. And if the central bank is a magic money tree, you can do all kinds of magic with macro. But honestly, it's not. Inflation is the real constraint. If you print all that money, you're going to get inflation at some point. And so that's, I think, Trump's next move. Because when you look at what Trump does in his businesses, when his businesses are doing badly, first he looks around for a cheap bailout. He looks for someone to give him money. If he can't do that, he declares bankruptcy. So I think his instincts in America will be the same. Run the country like a business. Unfortunately, it's a failing casino. So then, so his first instinct will be go to the Fed and say, hey, Fed, yields are too high. Print money, bring these yields down. Buy the bonds. Do QE. I think that's what he's going to try to do. I think he can probably get the Fed to do it, and I think it will raise inflation. I don't know if he can get the Fed to do it, but I think he probably can. Like, he can just threaten to throw them in El Salvador in prisons or something if they don't do QE. I don't know. Whatever, right? He's crazy tin pot dictator now. I don't know what he can do. So anyway, the point is that, like, suppose he can, then we'll just get inflation. And then everyone gets mad because suddenly your purchasing power goes down. Groceries are expensive again. Like, we're back to 21, 22, except now this time it doesn't necessarily end. And so that's one scenario, and that would be equivalent to Trump in one of his personal businesses, looking for a bailout, looking for free money. Okay. So that's one thing. The second thing that he can do is default on the debt. So America could default. That will immediately make GDP fall by about 20% or maybe more. It will also crash the global financial system. Every other country will suffer too. You want to depreciate the dollar? We'll default, sovereign default, we'll do it. And so sovereign default will crush our financial system, absolutely destroy our manufacturing companies because nobody will be able to borrow for like years and years. Our manufacturing capability will go out the window and we will be a deindustrialized country. Like that's the ultimate fuckage. But like Trump has shown no inclination not to do that kind of stuff to us. And it's definitely fits with his business instinct. So sovereign default will crush every company you own and every asset you own.
Yeah. Definitely don't want that. I want to make sure we have time for the other thing we want to talk about, which is what would a good anti-China strategy look like?
Right. So there is some indication that some people in the Trump administration want to take on China. I don't know if Trump cares about this anymore. But certainly there are people in the administration, I think Besant cares, or Besant, how do you pronounce it?
I think Besant, but I'm not sure.
Besant, okay. He cares. I think he cares. And I think there's other people who care. And, you know, Peter Navarro's written books about how bad China sucks. I just want to call him Peter Ritardo every time. This podcast is so politically incorrect. We're going to get canceled. Like if cancel culture were still there, this podcast would have gotten at least me and possibly also you canceled like 6 ways to Sunday by now. You know, it's just my career would be over if it was still 2017. I couldn't do this podcast. Thanks, Trump. All it cost was my entire economy and all of American greatness forever, and I was able to say the word retard on air. Yay. Anyway, so these people do want to take on China, I think, and how would we do that if we were actually doing it? Well, what you want to do is create a non-China bloc. That's what you want to do. So you want to have China and then the rest of the world. Why? 2 reasons. Number 1 reason is scale. So manufacturers get lower costs and they get more efficient and they get much better when they can sell a lot more product. And so if we can sell all our products very easily to Brazil and India and Japan, and then they can sell all their products easily to us, both of our manufacturers get scale. Our total available market increases. You can think of, in VC terms, scale is just TAM. The more TAM you have, the better you can do, because a venture business with a very large TAM can raise a lot of money and can use that money to get better at what it does, right? Just sort of improve. It's the same thing kind of in manufacturing, except it works a little different because you have physical economies of scale with your plants scaling up. Like BYD is building a factory that's I think bigger than San Francisco. A single factory. It's 4 times the size of our biggest factory we ever built, which at that time was by far the largest factory anyone had ever built. And so I think that was Willow Run. Willow Run was this amazing factory city. And now BYD is okay, bigger. I don't know if that might be too big. I don't actually know. But the point is that you can justify that scale if you can sell a lot of cars. That's why BYD has scale. So what we want to do is have 0 tariffs with any country other than China and have them have 0 tariffs on us. So all of our manufacturers get to scale. Okay. Japan's get to scale and America's get to scale. The people running our current trade policy think of this in terms of competition. They think we're competing with Japan, we're competing with India, we're competing with all these things. Yeah, there's competition, but the point is that scaling overpowers competition. And that's actually what Krugman got a Nobel Prize for showing. Krugman actually got a Nobel Prize for this, showing that scale in a modern industrialized economy, scale matters more than competition. So in other words, our car companies and Japan's car companies and even India's car companies can all succeed at the same time if we just all trade with each other. Because people have this taste for variety. So they want some Japanese cars and some American cars and blah, blah. So scale is the best. So we want 0 tariffs, 0 trade barriers with any country that's not China. So we just build up massive scale and then put tariffs on China. But, the other reason, by the way, is supply chains. So one reason China's so great at manufacturing everything is because they do everything in-house. They have, if you need injection molding, you can just call up your buddy at the injection molding place and be like, hey, give us this and this, and you work closely with them. So they have all the supply chains in country and they all work together. Okay, we need that too. We can't do that all in America because we're smaller than China. We can do more of it than Korea can. We can do more of it than Japan can, but we can't do as much of it as China can because we're small. I'm just talking about not small in terms of dollars of consumption. I'm talking small in terms of number of people and number of to like run these firms. We can't make as many of these supply chain firms as China can. We don't have the people. So that's why we need the non-China bloc to make all the little supply chains. We need to like seamlessly trade with Canada and Mexico and Japan and Korea and India and Europe and Latin America. Okay, we need to seamlessly, barrierlessly, permissionlessly trade with all those people. Okay, and that needs to happen so that we can get scale and so we can get supply chains. And then we put tariffs on China. But here's the thing. The way our current tariff system works, we only tariff things based on where they're finally assembled. So if China makes a phone, takes it apart, sends the snappable pieces to Vietnam, and some guy in Vietnam, or more realistically, a girl in Vietnam, snaps all the little plastic pieces together and ships it to America, that phone was made in Vietnam, quote unquote, and it gets tariffed as such. Okay. And one of the rationales that Stephen Moran, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, one of his rationales for putting tariffs on everybody in the world was to prevent this kind of thing. Which is kind of like, like if there's a mosquito on your thumb, you crush your thumb with a hammer, you'll get the mosquito anyway. But so back to what I was saying, what you need is data. You need better data. So you need to have data on where the imported components for everything you import comes from. So like if you import a laptop, you need to know where the chips were made and the screen was made. Okay. And where the injection molding was done and blah, blah. You need that. And if you have cars, you need to know where the car parts came from and blah, blah. And so if you do that, then you can put tariffs on China, not in terms of final assembly, but in terms of value added, where were the parts made. And then you can tariff China. Once you get that data. To get that data, you need an army of bureaucrats. Building software systems for people to report on and then monitoring the systems. And also calling people on the phone because your software system's not going to be up in a day. You need a ton of bureaucrats. You need opposite of Doge. You need massive state capacity expansion. Are we going to do this? No. So that is what your system would look like. On top of that, we need industrial policy to sort of like plug the holes, fill in the things that we let China dominate, like batteries and rare earths. Right? We need to do that industrial policy. And preferably we could do that in cooperation with other non-China countries. And export controls will also help. We can poke holes in the Chinese economy even as we plug holes in ours with industrial policy. And so that's basically what a policy to build up our strength, our manufacturing strength versus China would look like.
Yeah. That's a good overview. And let me ask another question related to this is, if we can go back in time to 2010, 2005, or, around this time period, and, what would we tell ourselves back then in terms of a China containment strategy?
What would we tell ourselves in terms of China if we could go back to before? Well, so before in the 2000s when Bush was president, right? What we could have done was complain about China's currency undervaluation, because at that point, their undervalued currency was really allowing them to build up scale very fast and preventing us from building up scale. At that point, we could have declared them a currency manipulator. We could have taken them to the WTO. We could have put on countervailing duties. That cat's out of the bag right now because they're much less dependent on us than they used to be. Okay. So we could have, that's one thing we could have done. And we could have done, basically, yeah, like, and then when in the 2010s, when Xi Jinping was like increasing China's capacity in all these tech industries, we could have done export controls earlier than we did. Obama could have done the export controls, but Obama was too hung up on this idea of peaceful, blah, blah. We could have done industrial policy earlier than we did. Trump could have done industrial policy in his first term, but he didn't. Hell, Trump could be doing industrial policy now, but he's canceling whatever Biden did. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that we missed that boat.
Yep. And when we complain about unfair China trade policies, do we have a point, or are we overstating them, or what is sort of?
Oh no, we absolutely have a point. Their trade policies are massively unfair. They're totally mercantilist. They're designed to sell as much stuff and buy little stuff as they can.
Right. And by them joining the WTO, were the expectations that they were like, what did that enable for them?
Scale. They could sell.
Got it.
And also investment. They could get FDI, which allowed them to get our technology because our company set up plants there. They learned how to do our stuff, and then they could do it for themselves.
Right. And so what you recommended is that some version of the TPP?
Yes. It's like a souped up TPP, and TTIP was the Europe one.
Got it.
So we could do all those things. Yes, TPP was great, but we killed it because we had to think of trade in these zero-sum competitive terms where we're competing with every single other country in the world instead of like just competing with China. It's
And who killed the TPP
Trump.
in 2016 in the first?
Yeah, Trump. But to be fair, Bernie was also promising to kill it if he got elected, and he lost. Hillary Clinton, she waffled. She went back and forth. She probably wouldn't have killed it, but she had promised to kill it and probably would have broken that promise.
And what was the rationale for killing it?
None. I mean, like they take advantage of us. It was the same rationale, and Bernie had the same thing. Bernie and Trump were selling the same snake oil.
Right. Makes sense.
Populism, man. They taking advantage of us. We got to stop them, man. We can't trade with them. We can't have mutually beneficial arrangements with other people. There's no positive sum game, man. It's all just competition. It's all just us or them. That's it.
Is that a good note to end on? We've done a bit of explanation on capital flight, on sort of think about currencies, on thinking about what real sort of China containment strategy or trade strategy might look like. Shall we wrap on that?
Yeah, I think we pretty much said it all. I mean, like, yeah, there's we can go deeper on any one of those topics, but I think that fortunately for us, we'll have the ability to do that in the coming months because Trump. I can't say whether Trump is backing off or not. He's reached this weird quantum state where he gets a superposition of constantly backing off and constantly getting more aggressive, and so but like a quantum computer, he can do computations in both states at the same time. So in other words, we're getting all the worst parts of both backing off and getting more aggressive.
Yeah. Wow.
But you know what? Yeah, we fucked around, and now as a country we're finding out. And I know some people are still scrambling to claim that we're not finding out, but we're finding out.
Well, we will keep finding out on this podcast, and we'll keep discussing.
Indeed. Stay tuned, everybody.
Yes, as always, a great episode. Until next time.
Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.